You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guests, Abdul Malik Kubako, Dr. Richmond Echiahene Kojopon Nkrumah, and Isaac Adongo. And I'm going to read your text messages right to you. And then when we are done, we'll get to the banking sector and find out what is going on in the banking sector. But before that, the reports portions I shared, this little observation is what I tried to summarize, and there's impression that I didn't get it correctly. This is the observation that they made after the investigation, that the petitioner misunderstood the requirement of build, own, and operate, BOO, stated in the RFP, and was under the assumption that BOG was going to pay the amount quoted in the bid documents to the winning whatever. BOG did not put much premium on the financial proposal, though it formed 20%, since it was going to give BOG an indication of how much the project was going to cost. The suppliers, unlike the technical proposal, which formed 80%, was to provide the solution for the monitoring of the system. Now let me read your messages. And Sani Yusuf says that I did 10 Ghana transaction and was charged 75 pesos, so it's not free, as Kojo Opong wants us to know. This is outrageous. Living Prince says that the intelligent Kojo is schooling Dongo on the interoperability. Eja Adam says the weakest argument on the 4.6 billion scam is that government was not going to pay. Government funds are public funds. I mean taxpayers' funds. This is the single biggest fraud on Ghanaians. You mean attempted fraud? That's what people are saying. That Ghanaian users of the service pay 4.6 billion when it could cost 18 million.
That's a minimum, by the way.
Okay. Anyway, interesting. Then Dixon Rudolph says that the magicians are performing magic. Folks, don't worry about debts. They will disappear by next year. Okay, so you are talking about the debt issue. We'll deal with that shortly. Musa Abattoir says that it's about time we tell this super incompetent leadership that enough of the rhetoric. First of all, is it true or not that the shifting interoperability was to be zero investment to the Bank of Ghana? They were to build, own, and operate the infrastructure over the period. Not so. Papa BCU says that $4.5 million and zero financing from central bank, which is good for our country. Whoever wants a depleted Bank of Ghana to continue to finance gifts must rethink, because it is not good for our ailing economy, period. Salam Daniel says that money in 25 years cannot, of course, be the same as today's. Discount each flows in today's terms, then compare to yours today. Then we will find out the real value in today's terms. Abuajiyao says, a panelist claimed a Moroccan firm has been our source, and you didn't ask him for the evidence. Okay, thank you. Charles Nyame in Saman Kesi. It's time, in this time of Momo, interoperability bruhaha, we can only be proud and thankful for persons like Dr. Isaaku and Dr. Esiama, who are always available to clear the mischief and lies thrown out by our political players. Okay, there was something that was attributed to Dr. Isaaku. I'm sure you have read the disclaimer. Okay, Yao Taklo Jr. says that can Honorable Adongo tell us the financials behind awarding the contract to Sifting Switch. Kofi Ofosu says that okay, so Kofi Ofosu has a substantive message. I was going to read his reply to somebody. He says, according to Gibbs boss, Mr. Achi Hesse, the $4.5 million is not just for the interoperability system, but for the operations of the Gibbs for the next 5 years. Millions of savings made by the states, so we should applaud it. And there is a recurrent question that has come in wanting Kojo Nkrumah to answer why what is being said to be cheaper now is going to cost 2.5 instead of the 1.5 that the shifting switch was going to deliver.
To fact check it. Fact check it and tell your audience.
Okay.
You don't need to debate this.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as you are aware, there's a lot that's been said about the banking system in the country, and we are having the Bank of Ghana, issue certain, assurances of how it intends to restore confidence, because people's confidence are broken in the way things have been going on. So what exactly is going on, and what also led to, for example, the Securities and Exchange Commission issuing a caution to people not to deal with 10 asset management companies? Why is it that the ICU is appealing for an extension of the deadline for the minimum capital requirements that are suggested will collapse, get some of the banks out of the system? The Bank of Ghana, however, is sure that the banks will be able to meet these minimum requirements. Could you, okay, this is where Doc's, prowess really will come to play. I don't understand what it is that is going on, except that I hear too much of the politicians doing these discussions, and one say that the current administration, by certain measures that they are introducing, are seeking to collapse these banks and it will affect the economy and so on and so forth. What's the problem?
Thank you very much. It's a problem that has been with us since 2009. What Ghanaians or other people are not actually researching into is that this issue started in 2009 when we started recording non-performing assets of 17.6. All through up to 2018, Bank of Ghana has recorded 23.7 in March. What it means that for every 100 cedis you have in a bank, 23.7 is gone. Meaning that 23% gone also affects the capital. It affects liquidity. The point is that deposits are used in creating loans. So if you use people's money to create loans and the loans are not coming, then it means you're creating a liquidity gap. And that is why we have had this problem over the years. It has been going on for us over the years, but nobody seemed to actually look at it from a research point of view. Apart from the non-performing, government has also helped to create the situation. If you look at the energy debt, the road construction debt, you read the IMF report, they say they are scheduling to pay 858 this year and pay the rest. They've forgotten that is people deposit. So if government has been paying all its outstanding debts, we wouldn't have been in where we are. Because I can tell you that government is a major economic activity player in this country. Successive government people haven't done that. So part of the problem. And then again, if you read the Bank of Ghana, let me read what Bank of Ghana, when they were putting out a notice for recapitalization. One of the issues is to support capital erosion as a result of high inflation, rapid depreciation of the currency. We talk about micro stability, and we always emphasize fiscal deficit is being controlled. Today is about, according to IMF, is 6%, which is good, 9.3. Inflation last year has happened to be 4.9, according to IMF. We've had inflation of 18% from 2009 to average of about 18%. And that has actually eroded the capital of the banks. What about currency depreciation? You'll be shocked to hear what I'm going to tell you. In December 2008, the cedi was equated $1, 1.21. In December, the same dollar, cedi is 4.3. So by my calculation, the currency has depreciated over 255% since 2008 to today. So if you even brought $100 million into cedis, your capital is gone. I went to one of the banks. who is sourcing capital as a financial advisor. And he told me that I brought 71 in the year 2010. Today, the money is $14 million. And he told me, if I've taken it to Francophone country, he told me, I can quote it, he quoted me. Or say I have investment in La Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, and Dahomey. I have not been called upon to recapitalize. Why? So in as much as we are all fighting of non-performing, we should be very critical about how we manage the currency depreciation, because it is one of the factors that has happened, have brought up these problems. But when people are talking, they just talk about the non-performing. The non-performing is one. Inflation has been, it's only this year we are lucky, or I think we are talking about nearly 10%. We've already have 18. And if you have 18, your currency, that is the depreciation of your capital. So we need, the governor has got a problem. A problem is that he needs to revive or resuscitate the banking sector. And don't forget, he has also a challenge. We are the only country where we can even upgrade savings and loans to become universal bank. I have never heard it anywhere. In America, savings and loan play a major role in the financial intermediation. In Ghana, you see any savings and loan, 3 days. At least those who collapse, the UT and Capital Bank. One was a finance house, and one was a savings and loan, who was given a universal license. And what people don't know is that there's a correlation between universal license and what you can do. You see, universal license give you a space of areas to compete, whether you have the capacity or not. So when they got the universal license, they started, some of them even went to estates. Some banks went to estates, taking people's short-term deposit and putting structures.
But that's a sign of growth, and everybody wants to grow. So if they start savings or microfinance entities,
you don't grow your business by using a short-term deposit. If you want to go into that sector, you need to have a long-term capital.
These developments you talk about in ways that, you know, would send shivers down people's spine, what are the implications and what are the solutions if you see we are actually at them or we are not?
The implications are that there have been regulatory failures. I hold no peace. I hold no peace, and I said it recently in my delivery. I hold no peace for the regulator. Because after all, we have only about 30 million people, and we have 33 universal bank. We have, according to Bank of Ghana, we have 321 microfinance. We have 141 savings and loans, 141 rural banks and community, and we have 37 savings and loans. Have they got capacity even to supervise? I refer to what Frank Edu, the managing director of CAR, said it 3 days ago that, do they have capacity? They don't. They don't. But all along, we seem to be interested in giving license. We will not seem to be interested in regulating and supervising. And also developing our supervisory capacity. Electronic, who monitors electronic issues? You only send BSD1, BSD something to Bank of Ghana. You need to be thinking about risk-based and even...
No, but when they send them and you don't obey them, then you get punished.
My brother, we were in this country 2015. Who came into this country to tell us that we need to do asset quality review? Wasn't it the IMF? The IMF came in their visit in March and realized that we seem to having a bloated loan portfolio. So they told Bank of Ghana, go and do a review. And that is what we are saying today. So I'm saying that if they were there and this thing were going on, didn't they have eye? Didn't they have ears to hear? And what did they do? So I believe that part of the problem is a regulatory failure.
But what are the implications for the people, for us?
You see, that is where we are having confidence now. Today, the confidence is going down. If you read the IMF report, which I have here with me, credit to private sector has declined from, I think, 50% in 2014 to 12.8%. Meaning that an average person like me, my business cannot access credit. Confidence is going. Because, you see, you are afraid to give your money. Because if it happens that I fail today or I collapse, where do I get my money? It takes a little long time before you even get your money.
You may not get at all.
No, banking you will get.
Okay.
Banking you will get. Banking, I can assure you, Bank of Ghana would always make sure that But the other financial institutions, if you put your money there and it goes, you are gone forever.
Right, I think that's the advice the president was giving to the people somewhere in the Borang-Afo region yesterday, to look for entities that are fully licensed and not deal with those that do not have the license for what they are supposed to be doing.
One thing is license. Let me finish.
There's this member of the governing council of the Ghana Association of Restructuring and Insolvency Advisors, GARIA, Mr. Jacob Sa. He says that poor corporate governance and mismanagement are the major cause of insolvency and liquidation in lots of businesses. He says businesses might go into distress due to a number of factors such as changing market conditions, change in the regulatory environment, and changes in the global environment. But as far as he's concerned, mismanagement was a major factor.
Yeah, I think, this is, you hear I've read an article here, Koku have it here. I've been writing a lot of articles. Seismic failure. What we have in this country is the failure of the regulator and the failure of corporate governance. The corporate governance is how businesses are managed and directed, especially for banks, managed and directed by the boards and management for the stakeholders. In Ghana, you set up a bank, we have criteria. Now, I heard LLC, the deputy governor, talking about proper fit regime test is going to be done. There is a criteria and a core principle 3 and principle 5 of Basel 206 and 2013. The core principle 3 says that you must pass a certain test before you can become a board member. I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to tell you this. How can a man of God who has no experience, who has no skills and competence, becomes a board chairman of a bank? It happened in this jurisdiction. But the question is that who passed him to be a chairman? Every board member in this country for Bank of Ghana must go for approval and pass.
So that's where your issue of regulation comes in.
That is where I'm having it.
Okay.
That's where I'm having it. And the corporate governance is that there are a lot of board failures. People go there and they bring their cronies, their friends. I wouldn't even mention.
but to the extent that the central bank, which is the regulator, has been able to, detect that some of these entities are not doing well, and is taking the right measures, letting, what do you call that arrangement where Pricewaterhouse has gone into this bank, for example, so it means that they are also doing something. They are just not sitting there.
That is a reactive strategy. Reactive. You must be proactive.
Right.
Proactive is that you go ahead of your problem.
Okay.
Don't let it happen before you go.
Right. Isaac, from where you sit, because this is also an area that you have expertise in, what do you find to be the problems and what does it portend for the economy? Despite all the bright things that we are hearing for the economy going ahead.
Well, I think the challenges in the banking sector are very serious challenges and they have to be addressed. Beyond what has led us to this in terms of corporate governance challenges and the difficult business environment, one of the major impacts on the banking sector is government-related exposures. As we speak today, government owes close to 5.7 billion of the banking sector. And per the reporting requirements and the classification of the quality of your loan portfolio, it takes government an average of about 24 months to pay. And by the time government pays, that facility that was given to the contractor or the businessman would have been downgraded to a non-performing loan.
You say downgraded, Doc is saying would have been written off.
Yeah, that's no, it is downgraded. Okay. Then when it is downgraded, the next thing is that you write it off, and you write it off against your stated capital. So your capital goes down. Okay. So what this means is that the 5.7 billion that has stayed for so long, if it is paid, immediately lead to a reinstatement of capital of these banks. 3.7 billion of that is attributable to local banks. So the local banks that are struggling to recapitalize would immediately find 3.7 billion on their capital if that money is paid. Now the challenge is that you haven't paid that money, but you have found 3.6 billion to resolve difficult banks. Meanwhile, the money is still sitting there to be paid. You've been asked to look for another 2.4 billion to support the banks. That will lead to 6 billion. And yet, the 5.7 that would have saved this problem is still there to be paid. So clearly, there is a disjoint between fiscal policy and the challenges of the banking sector. And I believe that if that was paid, it will ease even the recapitalization difficulties of some of the banks who are heavily exposed by government-related transactions. It doesn't mean that government itself probably has taken the loans, but government is exposed to businessmen who are also exposed to the banks. And when those businessmen are paid, the money goes to the bank gets their money back, they will have to write it back, and therefore their capital will go up. So that is a major challenge. Now, in the midst of this difficulty, when you have non-performing loans, clearly your liquidity is affected. You have assets that is not available for you to turn over in other new loans. So you get a liquidity problem. What then happens? The current liquidity in our banking sector has shrunk, even though the Bank of Ghana is becoming a major interference in providing emergency liquidity. So banks are now substituting cheaper sources of funding for Bank of Ghana's expensive emergency support to those banks. So what it then means is that the profitability of these banks are indirectly being transferred to the profitability of the central bank. So for instance, if you take UT, let's say you take Unibank, okay, because of the situation Unibank is in now, it is losing all its cheaper deposits. People are withdrawing their monies. As they are losing this
despite all the assurances that the Bank of Ghana gave,
yes,
that nothing is going wrong, they should
the
just
point
continue.
is that even if, under normal circumstances, every bank has a normal outlay of outflows, even if there's no problem. But the reason you don't see them have a problem is because they also get inflows from other deposits to offset the outflow, the difference of which they have to find. Now, you are not getting that inflows. All you are getting is outflows. So clearly, when the outflows are demanded and those monies are not immediately available because they are stuck in other loans that cannot be recovered immediately, how do you solve that problem? It means that you go to the Bank of Ghana because the interbank market, now realizing the systemic challenge you are bringing to the system, will not lend to you. And now you have to pay about 2% more to take money from Bank of Ghana, which is more expensive. So now those banks, technically, are operating for Bank of Ghana. Okay, so Bank of Ghana is putting a lot of liquidity there, charging these banks extraordinary interest rates. These banks are not getting new deposits. That's why I say you can never revive a bank when you put it under administration, because you press the panic button, and that is the challenge. Now, if you look at all the indicators released by the Bank of Ghana just a few days ago, the summary economic and financial data, the picture is not looking good. And I just want to quote a few of the indicators. The private sector credit, in real terms, has declined to negative 3.6%. In real terms, negative 3.6%. In nominal terms, it has declined to about 5.6%. And I heard you talk about 40% sometime to 12%. It has shrunk further to 5.6%. What it then means is that these businesses that rely on credit to make their profits aren't extending the credit, so their profitability is going to be affected. But it also means that businesses are not getting the stimulus that they need in order to expand and grow the economy and take on new jobs. So that is another problem. You find NPL, he's talked about, it has increased now to 23%, which is very alarming, which means that close to a quarter of the loans of the banks are going bad. And so about close to a quarter of the loans at the banks have been offset against the capital of those banks. And that is a huge challenge. If you restore that, you are really going to get a lot of liquidity and a lot of capital improvement for the banks. The other one is that I've spoken about liquidity, asset growth. The assets in the banking sector is not growing. From 30%, it's gone down to about 15%. Now here I'm using just between between the same period, March or April last year and now. Okay, so you see that there's that decline. Total deposit growth in general has declined. In real terms, it's negative, but in general, it has declined to about 15%. Now, where you find the challenge is when you take the core liquid asset of our banks as a proportion of their liabilities. In other words, how much cash do you have immediately to respond to demands on you? And you find that it has declined now from 33% to 30%. And you see profitability indicators are declining from 26% to 23%. So clearly there's a challenge. How are we dealing with the challenge? Is the current solution that we are pursuing going to help us? In the first place, one, I want to say that if government pursue a fiscal policy that discriminates in favor of the exposures of the banks, it would immediately, I would have said, instead of encouraging Bank of Ghana to borrow 3.6 billion, another 2.4 billion, government should have borrowed that money last year and paid off the 5.7 billion. You would have still had very strong banks now, because their liquidity would have improved, their capital situation would have been better, and they wouldn't have gone down. Now they have gone down, we are spending close to 6 billion to resolve them, and yet the 5.7 is still sitting there to be paid. It really doesn't make sense. Other one is that if you look at the emergency support that Bank of Ghana is giving, shouldn't the Bank of Ghana should be looking at a situation where its own financial trust, which is a subsidiary, that deals with its interests in other financial institutions, be looking at saying, okay, if I'm already exposed to you to the tune of about 2 billion, but by taking over and pressing the panic button and you losing all the monies that are going out and I having to continue to support you, why don't I take a business model that allows us to look at the bank as it is? For some of the banks that you are saying they are challenged and you are sending people there, I think the immediate solution should have been to say, okay, we are putting somebody there to temporarily look at it, but there must be an evaluation process of that bank, especially if the Bank of Ghana is already exposed to that bank. Now, once you have valued that bank, you can look at the shareholding structure. Bank of Ghana can now say, okay, instead of you giving that money back to me, can we find an investor to partner you? If we can't find an investor, can you bring additional money? If you cannot bring additional money, can you allow Bank of Ghana, through its own financial trust, to take a major stake, turn it around, and sell it off? In that case, you have a direct, you see, I talk about Dutch Bank. That bank today is one of the biggest banks that even lends to Ghana. But under the financial turmoil, it was going down. The government at the time took a decision to provide support to the bank through a similar arrangement. Okay. In the US, those banks that finally survived, those were the measures. Because I believe that the crafting of the laws under administration cannot allow, and I believe that there has to be a review of the provisions under administration. Because once you take a bank under administration, you can only do recoveries. Okay. Nobody will bring money to that. All right. And at the end of the day, the bank will collapse. And I will be very surprised if Bank of Ghana doesn't turn out a profit on this year. And all those profits are coming from the expensive loans it is giving to already troubled banks as liquidity support. Interesting.
Okay, so and as you spoke, I just observed Dr. Chiahene nodding to almost every single point that you were making, and Kojo was taking notes and also nodding. But if I may start, Kojo, from this point, and this is someone who also has, experience within the financial sector. Stephen Amoah, I want to find out from you whether you think this is what we are doing, even though it is the reality and we shouldn't be doing. He says that any attempt to heap scorn on the distracting potential of the banking industry and past will jeopardize our economy. Check 1930 in US, similar situation messed up their economy badly. 1979, it happened in Asia. The financial reason is that it is an aggressive sector with systematic risk index, meaning the collapse of the industry will definitely get our economy in deplorable state. Yes, Bank of Ghana is legally doing that which its legal framework allows or something. However, other alternative solutions should be explored to rather restore the required positions of the industry. The bank should also manage their unsystematic risk factors well. Broader stakeholder discussions must be considered now. So he says that ends with Cinderella syndrome is destroying Africa. And this is Stephen Amoy, the CEO of Maslog. He begins on a note. You remember some time ago we were told that if we are not careful, the things we say collapse the economy.
That remains true.
Right.
That remains true. And that's why anytime it comes to discussing matters of our economy, particularly of our financial services sector, we all have to be cautious the way we handle it, because money moves with trust and confidence. And I think, as has been said across the table, it's a very critical sector of our economy. I mean, if you look at our whole real sector and you look at the financial services segment, it's peculiar because it has a multiplier effect. It holds our savings, a good chunk of our wealth. It lends to create credit throughout the system, etc., etc. But the truth is that we have had systemic challenges in the sector. Professor says 2009. I will even take you further. Okay, I've been reading Professor Ernest Aite and Ravi Kambo, The Economy of Ghana, 60 years after independence. And if you indulge me just to read to you briefly, when we started attempts at curing the challenges in our financial services sector from 1972. And I'll just briefly read from page 122. It says that the weakness of the financial sector mirrored, and just listen and see if you find any similarities between then and now. The weakness of the financial sector mirrored the general decline of the economy. Between 1970 and 1982, per capita income declined by 30%. Import volumes fell by a third. Real export earnings halved. Domestic savings and investment fell. In 1983, the government introduced the Economic Recovery Program and the Structural Adjustment Program, and they did a number of things to try and clean this up. I'll take you to 1988 to 97, where we tried the second one called FinSAP. Yes. Yeah. The Financial Sector Adjustment Program was the first formal financial sector reform program in the post-independence Ghana, and was a logical complement of the EIP. In the context, it was the synthesis that resulted from the untenable inefficiencies of the centrally controlled financial system. And listen to this part. Part of the challenges when we go to the third level, FinSAC 1, 1988 to 91, liberalization of the financial and banking environment with the removal of ceilings, compliance issues with the banks, the need to strengthen banking supervision, profitability challenges. There are several of them. I can go through the whole list here. We have had systemic challenges in our banking sector, and as far back as, this is more or less our request to the IMF in 2014, thereabout. This is March 2015, where we were, telling the IMF about the fact that we have to go back and clean up the the banking and financial services sector because emergency lending assistance was not being managed properly. All of these issues, they've been here for a while now. And the truth is that,
part of restoring confidence.
Yes. The truth is that in our previous attempts to resolve it, we move one step forward, sometimes take a step backwards. In 2007, I think, we recapitalized at 60 million Ghana cedis. 208. Yeah. At 60 million Ghana cedis. That was when one cedi was $1. Yeah. So it was equivalent to about $60 million. But if you look at currency depreciation over the period, by 2013, that was, whittled away. Your people couldn't play on the global scene, etc. Today, we have been asked just to come to $100 million, which is about 400 million Ghana cedis. And it is one of a number of interventions. Because I think, as has been said around the table, there's no single bullet to this problem.
Okay.
If you tell the banks recapitalize, and they recapitalize, and the regulation system does not improve, it will happen again, as has happened across our financial history over the years. So you have to recapitalize, you have to improve regulation, you have to improve management
microeconomic stability
of all of these ones. And then, fourthly, you have to ensure that the macroeconomic picture is bolstered. What are the things in the macroeconomic picture? He was talking about inflation. Inflation wipes away. You see, when inflation starts going at the levels where it was going until recently, we've come down to about 9%. We are hoping we can hold single digit, or we're working to hold single digit at least for the foreseeable future. Because when it goes to that level, you'll notice that interest rates will go up. They will now start charging higher rates on what you are borrowing. If you are not making windfall profit, you struggle to come and pay back, and then the NPL start coming back in again. If your currency has been depreciating like the rate at which it was depreciating, he was talking about 40% over. I was just checking one of our tables here. Currency depreciation, the year 2014, it depreciated by 31%.
1 year.
1 year. 2015, 15.7%.
So 45.
2016, 9.6. 2017, we were able to take it down a bit, 5.0. We have to hold the currency, because you see, these things that sometimes when we say, and then people say, oh, these are just numbers, they don't matter. These are the things that come together to wipe away what's happening in our finance. And we have already agreed that it's a critical sector. So here's my point. The Bank of Ghana is taking an approach that says that we want to nudge everybody to recapitalize. And the conversation now is about, should a special dispensation be given to indigenous banks? The risk with that is that in 2008, 2007, at the end, a dispensation was given to some indigenous banks.
Up to 12.
Not all of them met the 60. In 2013, the 120, not all of them met it. So we have always done this thing where the real surgery that we need to do, so let's hold the indigenous banks. And you know, now under the Act 930, if you look at the new Banking and Specialized Deposit Taking Act, the moment your capital adequacy ratio hits -10, the central bank technically should be intervening. In fact, when it begins to get to those zero limits, the law gives them power to revoke your license. Indeed, if the central bank said it was going to follow this law to the letter, we will have more challenges in our banking sector.
And why should they not follow it?
But you see, it is a balance. If today they said they were going to do it, they will bring down the government, and you have a lot more chaos.
Because the issue about the recapitalization, I've been educated by some of the financial people who say, what is the cry about this thing and asking for? Is it to come bring it down, and also, as it were, to structure it in categories and not to ask all the banks to do the same thing?
Because listen, when you do that,
and I'm referred to, how many banks do you have in Nigeria? Have you asked yourself?
24. And
how many banks do you have in Ghana? How 24. Many of the banks? There's only one bank in Nigeria, I am told, might swallow almost all your banks here that you
I'm going to show you a document.
Yes.
And refer to some parts of it. And just throw out something. For our indigenous banks that we are talking about, and I don't want to mention names, you can see them.
We know about it already.
Well, but I just want to point out something. Look at how much of the total assets in the banking sector they control. 4.7. When it comes to total deposits, 3.1. When it comes to gross loans in the system, 4.1. These are your indigenous banks in the system. You see those that are in this color. Right. I don't want to go into too much. Here's the point I'm making. The Bank of Ghana is adopting an approach that says that in one breath, we have to encourage these banks to recapitalize, because if you're already challenged and you do not recapitalize, it will catch up with you. No matter how much time or postponement is given, it will catch up with you, and you may not survive. And if we do not also quickly get them to recapitalize, the challenges that are emerging on the scene, the kind of ticket sizes that are coming up. I mean, our economy last year, 167 billion cedis in nominal terms. 2017, about 205 billion. Today, if you look at the kind of ticket transactions that banks have to do, one LC, if you don't take care, your single obligor limit at those old amounts cannot enable our Ghanaian banks to play. So it is in our collective interest to do it. In South Africa, when they did it, today we talk of ABSA. ABSA is like the biggest bank in South Africa now. It is bigger than all the foreign banks in South Africa. You know what ABSA means? Amalgamated Banks of South Africa. They had to go through this exercise. And when the deadline was reached and some of the banks couldn't meet it, they had to assist them to amalgamate. I agree with the view that it should not be a shock. We should engage and assist guidelines for mergers and acquisitions, so that if that ought to happen, then it happens. But it is something that must be done. But that's just one of the other pillars. You also need to ensure, like we said, that the macro, like we are beginning to see now, inflation down to about 9%, growth is up to about 6.8%, the depreciation is at least going to go below 5%, deficit is not, and the deficit has been one of the most dangerous things. As of 2012, 2016, we're running twin deficit, double-digit deficits. And what the deficits do is that you are spending, and that's where I'll end on, you are spending more than you are raising. So when you give contracts as a government, when there's no money, there's no money. When you give people clearance, go and do this because we want to win elections, or you are doing all of what is going to happen is that you would have A, bloated the deficit, but B, what you have done is that the contractors are going to go to the banks, borrow the money, do the work, and you can't pay them, and it will add to the NPLs there. In my constituency, and I'll just say, in my constituency, I'm sure there are people watching me in my constituency now. The main road from Oda to Nkoko is a headache for us. It was given under the Cocoa Roads program, and the contractor was not given a cedi. He has borrowed 11 million Ghana cedis to do that first phase. And now cocoa prices are tanking. There is not much money to even pay him for his initial certificates. And then you would have cries that pay the contractors. But you gave contracts away when you knew there was no money. And you have encumbered, or today the banks have been encumbered because of that. I get my point. So we are now at a point where we have to bring a mix of various solutions together and egg us to.
I'll bring in you finally to clear a few points, then I'll take a break. But wait, Kweku said I should talk to you and stop coming to him. Of course. But you see, Kweku has a concern. Yes, I know. Kweku, you have a concern, and you know, Kojo raised a bit of it about the clemency, sort of, to give to the indigenous banks, hold them along, don't let them collapse, and all of these matters. When you hear all that is going on, and the Bank of Ghana being forced to come out to talk about measures to restore confidence in the banking industry, what are your propositions for ensuring that they keep to the rules and yet keep the indigenous banks alive?
Can I do something? Because I don't want to come back to this matter. Yeah. My brother talked about the fact that government owes about 5.7 billion in the banking sector. The total asset size is about 93 billion. That's about 6.1%. The problem is not government indebtedness, even though
you give a simple solution you are not using.
Well, but that's, I mean, the simple analysis I've done therefore shows that that is not really the challenge. I just wanted to throw that analysis
out. You. Yes, Kweku.
Well, you refer to my sentimental, you know, appreciation of the thing. I know when it comes to such things, sentiments are no substitute for science. The hard reality is what people look at. I appreciate that, you know. But I've been wondering.
You get into trouble even when you insist on the Republican status of this country and what we should refer our chiefs to.
I hear you.
you are said to be disrespectful.
Yes. And I'm under attack left, right, center. But I have the shock absorbers. I can take them. Yeah. You know, the president, there was a committee that was set up. It was given a certain deadline. Is it 26th May or so? So in few days' time.
Yes, the president's intervention. Yeah.
Yes, after the petition.
Yes.
And a committee, a 10-man committee was set up. I've been waiting to hear about the report and the findings.
Right.
Even though I was disturbed in a way, because whilst this committee had been set up and had been given a deadline, occasionally I used to hear Bank of Ghana officials talking and restating their original position, which I thought was a bit, you know, it didn't make, I shouldn't say it didn't make sense, but it was worrying. So I've been wondering whether that committee really then had any purpose or use. Whatever it is, 26th May is just around the corner.
Right.
I'd want to see what kind of prescriptions the committee has put forward. I realize that the ICU is asking for extension of the deadline.
That may be in the report.
I hope they do. I hope, and I'm not talking serious business, economics, or finance. I'm talking sentiment. I hope they do. How much business does government or the state do with local banks? How much? And how much do they do with foreign banks? We have to look at those things in terms of our procurement, contracts, and credit things. I suspect we deal more with the foreign banks than with local banks. So we don't help the local banks to grow. I mean, you are an expert, so maybe you educate me if I'm wrong, you know. So to be honest with you, whilst I go for issues like mergers, acquisitions, and all the rest, I think this is the way forward in the long term, you know. But the extension is important. If you extend the deadline, it will create room, create an enabling environment for them to do even the mergers and acquisitions. You see, when people rush into things, you don't build good foundations. So I think the extension is critical. They ought to extend the time beyond the December thing, and whatever other prescriptions they are bringing forward can then be dealt with within the context of the extension.
So, Deshaun, what's your own take on this recapitalization? 400 million is and the arguments about the fact that, look, this is the best and we ought to do it and do it now, and stop continuing to urge the central bank to, as it were, not to push it. And the example I gave you, you're looking at South Africa, you're looking at even Nigeria, and you're looking at Ghana, very small, and we have banks littered all over the place, and yet it will take just one bank to swallow all of them up.
Thank you very much. I think everybody seems to be saying the same thing, that there's need for sanity in the system. But you see, from the empirical evidence from Nigeria had 2004. They went the same way we are going. They said increase the capital 25 billion naira. They did. After 10 years, 2011, they realized that even the regulator didn't have the capacity to do the universal banking. So the Nigeria in 2012 has come back and said, let us reclassify banks again so that we can recollocate your capital. If you want to do a commercial bank, Nigeria now, that is why the banks in Ghana are just universal. When you go to Nigeria, they are not universal banks. They are the commercial bank, mortgage bank, and the mortgage bank with its capital, commercial bank with its capital. And this all hulu balu, like one of the reasons that to be able to do a big ticket business, it is neither here nor there. Businesses that HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank will do, you don't expect a Ghana Commercial Bank in London to do that. No. The banks itself segregate themselves. But as we are looking for capital, in order not to create panic in the system, like Koku has said, it's a serious issue. The way they are managing the information, to me, is a very, Dongo has said it, it's a very dangerous thing. You see a Bank of Ghana staff coming in, this is what we have said, this is what we said. After all, if they all close down, what will be the employment? What will be the employment on you? And what will be on your GDP? It happened in this country in 1988. When we did the FinSap, it was a bailout. And even as I speak to you, Citibank was bailed out in 2009 when there was crisis.
Okay.
But except that, currently we have a debt hang of 70-something%. So it doesn't give you any, but ideally, we will bail you out and we'll tell the MDs, the board, everybody to step aside.
Okay.
And then we manage it to bring you where you are before we give you a bank. And then we set a good regulation like board. How many board members? You see, my brother, my only worry about corporate governance, the board, the type of board and management we have. You go there and they are just sitting down there.
Okay.
Basel 2 and Basel 3. No, I'll say it. Basel 2 and Basel 3. Governor is saying it. The IMF has also even raised an issue. Do you think your people have the capacity to do it within the period? And we started Basel 2 in 2009, my brother. We have no capacity how to go about it.
Okay. Interesting. Now, Kojo has small points of the law. Yeah, so you draw attention to it. We listen to El Siawaji, and we go for a break. We return to look at how the economy is doing on the front of the borrowing that is being done and the debt portfolio, public debt portfolio.
No, yes. I mean, I was just showing you that the point he's making are actually captured in the Act 930.
Right.
But my understanding of the 400 is that it's minimal, and that now, depending on the risk you are taking in line with Basel II, etc.,
the bank has power to
now even ask for
you to do additional. Okay, so interesting. Yes.
Yes. On the issue of the fiscals, you see, these are not direct Bank of Ghana exposures. The foreign banks won't do business with those contractors in our country. It is the local banks. So when local contractors have outstanding obligations, you will find chances are that 90% of that money is coming from the local banks, because the big banks see them as risky. But when government itself is doing a big ticket project, yes, the foreign banks are happy to do that.
Coco's indication.
Exactly. But this issue is actually about those local businesses that have taken money to do government projects. So we need to understand that perspective. The other one is also that in terms of doing big tickets projects, that is why there's syndication. Banks can syndicate.
That is it.
When they see an opportunity in the business, they syndicate. Even for business, cocoa loans and the rest, they syndicate and do it for us. So that is not a major problem. But in the case of doing mergers and acquisitions, I think banks may be interested in doing mergers and acquisitions. But it shouldn't be something that is imposed on them. In any case, if they are asking for a little bit of more time, it will take you 1 year to 1.5 years to do a merger because of the due diligence, the negotiations. So clearly you will be back to the same time limit that they are asking for. In my view, if we pay the fiscal cost, that will help the banks. it will help the local banks immediately.
Okay. So you are back to your prescription.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Let's listen to the Bank of Ghana briefly, and then we take a break. We return to look at the economy in terms of the public debt portfolio and what is going on, and the warning that the World Bank is giving us.
Public feels that we should be intervening sooner than later and sanction appropriately when needs be, and that we should not wait for too long in the face of violation of our rules. And that's a fair point. And we take that point, and we're going to make sure, as we've already started doing, that banks do not get away with behavior that is inconsistent with the rules, and that we as a central bank and as a regulator, we would enforce the rules early enough and not forbear, and we would ensure that we take appropriate action as needed to protect deposits.
Madam, you spoke about one in your presentation about some new set of rules that will be rolled out soon to more revive confidence in the bank. How soon will these new sets of the fit and proper rule as well, how soon will these laws be in place for all of us in attempt to ensure and tell the depositor that everything is safe and is sound?
You saw that in March, we issued our corporate governance guidelines. We're working on our fit and proper test requirements, and we think that by June or July, we should have them out. At the same time, we're working on our risk management guidelines, which should be coming out around the same time. We're expecting the banks to also comply with the Basel II and III capital framework, which we've already rolled out, and we're expecting that as of July, they would start implementing them.
And all these things you believe that would help revive the confidence that we are all looking for to tell everyone out there that the sector is safe and is sound?
Absolutely. With stronger capital comes more resilient banks. At the same time, with strong corporate governance and strong risk management systems ensures that the capital is used well, is put to use, and banks are behaving in a way that is prudent.